So we're going to talk today about Chapter 13, which is the last 10,000 years. It's a period of time that we call the Holocene. We're still technically living in the Holocene, although next chapter, in Chapter 14, we'll talk about a proposal that there might actually be a new geological time period that we just started living in the past 100 years or so. So, some of the changes that took place in the past 10,000 years have been largely cultural. And so this isn't a class on cultural anthropology or archaeology, so I don't want to focus too heavily on that. And I just gave a preface lecture, a short one, to tell you a little bit about that. So let's focus instead on the physiological aspects of the cultural changes that have taken place in the past 10,000 years. But we are going to have to mention the reason why these physiological changes are taking place because of the cultural decisions that we've made. So the time period that we're talking about, I mentioned in chapter 12, that with the origin and dispersal of anatomically modern humans, this took place at a time when you had the Würm glacial periods, which were rising and falling of temperatures that brought on waves of glacial advancement from the polar regions, and it was an extremely unstable time for the environment. That it was hard to predict intergenerationally or even from year to year how the environment was going to behave. You had the advancement of glaciers and you had them retreating, and this hugely affected local environments and global environments. So you didn't have any ability, even with the anatomically modern human brain, to really predict what was going on. But at the end of this glacial period, the end of the Ice Age, you had a greater, really a remarkably stable period of time for the environment. We're still living in that flat line where you had the global temperatures going up and down. We have been in a flat line, a warm period for 10,000 years or so, 10 or 11,000 years. And that's what we call the Holocene. That has allowed humans to have greater predictability of what types of animals and plants are going to be present, and what to do with them, and how to maximize getting the most out of them. So this is an environmental change, which the environmental change itself could have an impact on our bodies and our physiology evolutionarily. That's certainly possible. But probably more important were the cultural decisions that we made, that I talked a little bit about in our preface. This was the idea that humans started to step in to the place where natural selection had been making all the decisions before. Okay, nature doesn't make decisions, but it's an impersonal force that chooses who lives and who dies. You either live or you die because of the characteristics that you have, and nature doesn't really care about whether you look good or you are fast. If you're unlucky, or if that's not the right adaptation for that particular environment, too bad. You get selected out. Now, humans in the past 10,000 years started to consider that they could make decisions in place of nature. This is artificial selection. And this led to a new type of diet and new behaviors. This is the two concepts of sedentism and domestication. That sedentism is living in permanent villages and permanent residence in villages or towns or eventually cities. And domestication is the genetic modification of plants and animals by humans to make them dependent upon us. So, for instance, a cat. Is a cat domesticated? Well, some biologists believe no, because have not been genetically modified from their wild cousins. That cats are actually just habituated to humans, that they tolerate living with us. But they haven't been genetically modified. Whereas dogs are a different species from the wolves from which they descended. But every single dog that exists in the world today was modified and bred by a human. They didn't do that on their own. And humans selected particular characteristics that were suitable for us. We made those decisions. Nature didn't create a dog. We decided that we liked those. We didn't like the wolves that were these snarling, snapping, biting curs that would kill us in a heartbeat. We liked the more docile ones that we could throw a scrap of food to and it would protect us at night from other predators. And by breeding those characteristics, those behavioral and physiological characteristics, generation after generation, we created a new species, a dog. And it is now diverged from its wolf cousins, and they are now no longer the same species. That is a case of domestication. The same thing goes for plants, that there is wild wheat and there's domesticated wheat. Wild wheat doesn't look very much like domesticated wheat. We have changed it. Its looks, its properties, and its behavior. It can't reproduce without us planting its seeds. It can't harvest itself. It can't, but it also has qualities that don't exist in the wild either. Seeds are just basically baby plants. They don't have to be huge. They don't have to be giant grains in the wild. But that's what we want. We want to maximize our efficiency, our harvest, our yield. So we have bred into these domesticated plants like wheat and maize and things like that, the features that we want to see. And nature is no longer making those decisions entirely. But these decisions also had a change on our physiology. We've seen all along that diet is a huge factor in terms of evolutionary, in terms of evolution. And so our teeth have changed, our faces have changed, our musculature has changed, our bodies have changed, our diet has changed, all sorts of things have changed. And other cultural factors as well have stepped in to sort of thwart evolution. So for instance, I wouldn't last very long on my own without culture because I can't see very well. Without the optometrist and the factory that makes these lenses and frames, I would be in a really rough spot. I would not be able to survive without culture. So our culture, in terms of manipulating biology, is also manipulating our own biology. And